So welcome everybody to TruLondon. We are live streaming via Google Hangout. The first topic that we're going to discuss today is the future of the recruiter in 2020. What will that look like? How will technology impact? We are joined by Johnny Campbell of Social Talent, who's going to be leading the track, as well as Jason Palmer from Kelly, Bill Fisher, Oscar Mager, and Mike Sandyford, Job Rate.
Great, guys. Well, good morning, everybody. For those of you listening in or watching in, we're going to talk about where the recruitment industry is going as a whole over the next 7 years. There's several aspects to this. Bill Borman, one of the organizers of this event, had postured that maybe in 7 years nobody will need a recruiter because it will be automated and hiring managers will use online tools that identify talent and bring them to the table and will be a better system, and that's already occurring in certain industries, so that the industry is dead. Other people say, well, we're going to move up the food chain, we're going to do less admin through automation, and recruitment is going to become a higher value added knowledge kind of working job about relationship management. Some say it's just going to be about admin, organizing interviews, which you could argue some people do at the moment. So what I'm trying to get a feel of is, where are we going, do you think, as an industry, both in-house and the agencies as well, in 7 years? And obviously remembering that 7 years ago was '06. So it may seem like the future, but 7 years isn't that much of a long time, considering what's a massive change we've gone through in the last 7 years, of course, driven by a recession. But where are we going to be in 7 more years' time? So Bill, maybe with the technology aspect, obviously you're the guy who built some of the technology that we're talking about that could change all this stuff. Where do you see recruitment going, and do you share Bill Borman's vision of the fact that maybe line managers can just do this themselves?
Cool. Thanks for the question. So we build tools that crawl the web to try to index all the jobs that are available. We build tools that crawl the web to index all the people that are available. We break out jobs by reporting structure, skills requirements, location, sector. We index people on all the same variables. We use algorithms to help somebody who's looking for a job find a job that fits what they're interested in. We do the same, helping somebody to find a person they're interested in. And then obviously, we've got tools that can marry those two automatically. So that somebody could just post a job and then instantly have 12 candidates that have, they work in the sector, they've got the required skills, they've got the appropriate job titles. So we think the industry is definitely moving in that direction. That being said, so people often just say, isn't everyone going to just use LinkedIn for recruitment? But the problem is that recruiting is a strategic initiative. And if everybody's making use of the same tool, you have no comparative advantage against other companies. So it's the same with a lot of these algorithms. So there's a lot of these algorithms are using the same approach to identifying, matching up these candidates. So we think in the future there are going to be multiple algorithms, multiple kind of sourcing platforms, but where we see the human element is really deciding which of these, is it education that matters most to us? Is it corporate fit that matters most? Is it any of these other dimensions you can evaluate a candidate, and then using that to help tune the algorithm so you have a kind of a unique strategic approach to sourcing. So we think there'll definitely be be machines that are doing a lot of the crunching, but we will have to have people again who understand the company, who understand the kind of the hiring goals for the hiring managers. You have to develop kind of a unique strategy, and then maybe it's like a mixer or something, but just knowing we want to use this algorithm for this, or which of these algorithms work most, which of these different data sets work best.
But
what we're trying to do.
So are we, there's two elements there. One is what you're saying is the people input to make sense of this. But also then is there a need, do we think, for people who are recruiters, but from a data scientist point of view, in terms of putting better inputs into making these systems better?
I don't think it's about just the data input, because you mentioned a point around company, and then it's culture.
Yeah.
A system can't determine culture. And for us, in terms of from the recruitment side, you still need to find the right balance in terms of the cultural fit and cultural compatibility of an individual into the organisation. So whilst we accept that technology is going to play, and does already play, a vital part in the process, in 6 years' time, of course technology would have advanced again, and I think that will help in terms of deselect
Sure.
unsuitable candidates, but it will create a more sort of fine-tuned pool that will still need to have that human interface, because actually it's the cultural bit.
Well, do you think then that the technology will actually, we're talking about sources, and the job, big job at the moment of recruiters and internal teams is that it's resourcing. That's what people are trying to do. So if you've got technology that's going to go and do that, okay, granted you massively need those people there, because it's not just about, just finding the right people, it's culture, as you say. What's the cost of a bad hire? You get the wrong culture fit, the cost of a bad hire is more than what you'd be spending in the first place. So I think that granted technology could replace perhaps the sourcing people, but I really do think you've got to have then those people that are the experts really about your brand, your hiring managers that are actually saying, yes, this is the right fit for our business. Because I think if you rely solely on technology, then your actual cost of hire could
becomes
become higher.
impersonal, and also, as well as the cultural piece, organisations are still very brand conscious, and again, the technologies are going to solve that. Also, the hiring manager, which is part of the discussion, there's pressure on the hiring managers these days to focus actually on doing their job, so actually they don't have time in their day or their week to focus on actually recruiting. Actually, when you take recruiting a person through the process, that actually it's quite a time-consuming task. And so actually, if they abandon their operational job to recruit, who's doing the operational job, which then impacts on the business.
How many recruiters today actually do the culture screening? We seem to be arguing that people will still do that, and I don't disagree, people will still do that, but isn't it true that today the hiring managers do the culture screen? So therefore the recruiters are just bringing them to the table, and we're not really disagreeing that can be automated.
Although I don't.
It depends on the solution, because you've got your traditional approach to recruitment, which is engage with a supplier who will then do the initial pre-screen and send candidates along, and then you've got in effect managed or in-house recruiters that actually take the process a step further. So they will be doing the cultural bit if they're actually embedded in the organisation. So there obviously there is a balance between understanding the customer in terms of the culture, behaviours, what they're actually desirable in terms of applicant, and then it's creating the balance. But it's the in-house guys.
And also, it's part of a process. It's not like, technology can make this all possible, of course, but it's not like that you have a process that says to a candidate, hi candidate, congratulations, our systems have selected you as our best candidate for the role. No, it's a process that you're going through. So first, a recruiter starts reaching out to a candidate and starts building a relationship. And at a certain point in time, he assesses already cultural fit. And at a certain point in time, he brings that over to the hiring manager and starts to involve the hiring manager in that process. And most of the time, hiring managers are already involved because they've brought on the candidate. We see at Sonos, we see that 40 to 50% of our hires are candidates are brought on by hiring managers, so they're already involved in the process. But the recruiter will be the person that is gluing that all together, and that will, in that process, will also be sort of the conscience of the hiring manager as well. So in debriefing, after they've spoken with the candidates in the debriefing process, asking the question is this your right candidate, and does he have the right education, does he have the right skills, is there a cultural fit? So when I first heard the idea of Bill, I didn't like it because it's about the role that you have. But on the other hand, I see in the future that there will be sort of the development that the hiring manager will play a more important role in the process. But I think still that the recruiter will be there to lead that process. Sure. And to facilitate that process.
That's interesting when you say as well that possibly 50% of candidates have come through the hiring manager, because that kind of relates with some of the findings in the Candies report last year, where it's the kind of increase. I think maybe that's a reflection of the increase of candidate referrals that come through the system and the relevance of the employer brand. And that's, how does that play in? And as you say, it's probably the hiring manager that owns that relationship.
Yes, that's how we have defined the process, and that's how hiring managers are involved in the process with Sonos. And I'm not sure if that's the case everywhere else, but that's how we do it.
But there was an interesting blog post written last summer by a lady called Lane Wary, who was a CXO of a tech company in California, and she's since spoken on the recruitment circuit about this, where she had 3 recruiters who went on maternity leave all at once, and she had to do the recruitment herself. And she took a scientific approach to all the applicants for this role, and she had about 400 applicants. She scientifically graded them and looked at their structure and everything else. And she was able to, she took this analysis one step further and looked at how recruiting works, and she examined quality of candidates, how they come in, and whether agencies versus internal recruiters versus the actual hiring managers get better people. And she benchmarked all that across quite a big number of people, and was able to come out and say, well, in-house corporate recruiters performed the worst. They were the worst at culture fit, candidate fit, everything else. Like, it's all relative. But the next best performers were agency recruiters. They seemed much better. But the best performers on all metrics that she measured were the hiring managers. Her point was that they never would have thought about it, but the hiring managers seemed to be the best at screening for culture, best at selecting, best at getting people through the process. And that, her, what she kind of got out of this was, maybe the hiring manager should be doing it. And you look at companies like Intello, were the first company to say to me that a lot of customers are coming to them for their sourcing tool, which is similar to OpenWeb and TalentBin, are hiring managers in small tech companies, because small tech companies don't have a head of recruitment or a HR manager. And they're kind of going, we know what good developers look like. We don't, recruiters tend not to know as much as us because we're hands-on, and let's just do a quick search, make a few phone calls, we know how to sell our company, and we'll get them engaged earlier. Which I guess it's different for a small tech company, but that's where Bill got the idea from, in terms of small tech companies seem to be going down this trend where they're going, screw recruiters, we'll just go straight in there and do it ourselves. Can that scale up though? Like, is
I was
that
about to say,
Yeah,
can you apply that to large volume recruitment? Because you mentioned a hiring manager taking the applicant through the process, and actually from the research, actually it was the hiring managers that had the best success. And that's great when you're working in an SME type organisation, boutique size, but when you take it to the big corporates, how are you going to achieve that? Because the big corporates, the line managers, everyone's under business pressures to deliver their business objectives and obviously bottom line performance. And actually if they're distracted with, dealing with recruitment on a mass scale,
Sure, but I
then
mean,
they get distracted, don't they, from their
It's about
core job?
education though, isn't it? It's about educating. If the hiring managers are making the right hires because they're educated well enough to know what the culture is, they're seeing what that culture fit is for that particular team. They know what the business processes are. And if HR or the internal recruitment teams don't know the full ins and outs, then all they're doing, they're guessing, going, well, they've got the skill ticks to say, yeah, okay, I think that's the right person, but you put it in front of the hiring manager, like, no.
But I think that's also interesting, the research that you mentioned, Johnny, that would be interesting to see is further down the line, okay, the hiring manager might have been the most successful in metrics for bringing them on, but if you looked a year, 2 years down the line, what about the retention? So is it the hiring manager also recruiting in their own likeness? And I think you said, Oscar, that sometimes the recruiter can be the conscience almost, and are they almost that objective sound check?
Absolutely.
In
That's a role that we have as a recruiter, I think.
Yeah.
And in that way, I think I'm totally convinced that the hiring manager is playing an important role in this whole process. I think the recruiter will remain sort of the process leader and the conscience in that whole process.
yeah, although if you're trying to build a more efficient system, you try to think about which inputs can you remove from the process. The hiring manager you can't remove from the process because you ultimately need somebody who makes that final decision. But the kind of the screening process and then and then just the workflow process. I mean, a lot of those things can really be automated.
And there's not only the hiring process, there's a larger process around that. There is a process of managing the candidate relationship after that. So there's loads of candidates that got rejected, and we need to manage that relationship with those candidates. There's also the candidate experience that is hugely important in the process, and that already starts before even the recruiter starts to contact the candidate. And managing that whole candidate experience, that is probably also responsibility of the recruiter.
So are we saying that we're expecting in the next 7 years to see fragmentation of the role of a recruiter into, I'm an assessment specialist, I'm an employer brand specialist, I'm a candidate service, i.e. customer services person, recruitment isn't our role, it's a sector that has 12 roles, and depending on your size and what you do, you employ people with different skill levels doing different parts of it. And what can be automated, you automate.
definitely, because you're already seeing that though, aren't you? You look at the role of recruitment now from what it was 5 years ago. Your sales, your marketing, your recruitment, your HR.
I was going to say that also, that shift between does it sit in the HR function, or is it more aligned with the business and perhaps the line manager, or does it have a much stronger affiliation with marketing? I mean, that's something we talked about at last TruLondon.
I think you did, but it is to the point, it's becoming more specialist. So the role of a recruiter is becoming more specialist, more technical in terms of skill and competency. Whereas, a good number of years ago, it was kind of, you kind of sit at your desk and you market out particular candidates. It's now evolving, supported by technology. But I don't think technology will ever replace a recruiter. I just think the role becomes more specialist. I think there's still, there's absolutely that need for that human interaction. The important point you mentioned was around actually the candidate engagement piece, keeping them warm for a process. Because how often do you hear about the kind of black hole syndrome? My details have gone in, I'll never hear anything again. Or actually, I hear 6 months later. By that point, you've completely disconnected with that organisation and what you thought they represented.
The hiring manager is doing his own job as well. So you need to have someone who is managing that the time frame. You can't have a candidate waiting a month, 2 months for hearing back from the hiring manager.
And also, remember we've come out of some very challenging economic times, and so referrals via a hiring manager would have been high because actually a lot of people have been sending their CVs in direct in the hope that actually they get their CV picked up. But as the market is now starting to shift, and actually we've already noticed that in certain skill areas candidates becoming difficult to source, then actually it's a number of different
and I
solutions.
think that there's also another element, because if you just make the hiring manager responsible for his own recs, that is pretty okay, but the recruiter has a more general overview of the business. So if he comes into contact with a candidate that is not the right fit for this role, then he probably knows what other roles in the company will become available in the near future and stays in contact with it. And that is not necessarily something that the hiring manager will be feeling himself responsible for.
Like that type of, that's something that can be solved somewhat algorithmically. So you said like the culture fit. Like I think in 6 years from now, we should not underestimate the ability of algorithms to really start to get that culture fit thing. So you can do an analysis of the current workforce, determine kind of some variables off of that, kind of fingerprint a company, use that fingerprint to then analyze a large candidate database, and then start to get that matching. But a hiring manager, like I don't know how to remove. I don't want to remove people from their jobs, but you just think about where the world goes in 7 years. Like a hiring manager still needs to be there, and then if you're trying to recruit somebody from an existing position, there's a sales, and coaxing and persuasion element that I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that algorithmically. So I know how to have somebody that you want to hire at your company. I know how to put that opportunity in front of them, but I don't.
But marketing can help make that easier. So your employer branding specialist, your marketing team in the hiring sphere, they can make your employer brand proposition and everything else so compelling and spread in the right sectors, so that when you do engage, you have people who want to work for you. So that you have to do less sales and less kind of persuading. So you can actually do that through marketing. Make that an easier role and have less people doing it. The algorithm thing, algorithmically solving culture is something that people are trying to do. I met with the head of recruiting for Google recently, who said, they have 4 billion data points they work with, and they analyze everything to try and bring people in. The only part of the whole hiring puzzle that they haven't automated and put technology around is culture fit. But they're working on it. And that's like their big mission to solve it, because they know everybody wants to try and solve that. And if you look at what do the people have, I think sometimes too much confidence in a human being doing that. We say that people are better at that. It's like, we don't get it right. We're actually really bad sometimes at culture fit and making bad hires. And fundamentally, what are we trying to do? We're trying to observe variables we think correlate with success. It's inconsistent across an organization. It's been a gut instinct. People kind of shy away from, I don't want to automate that, but if you can scientifically examine what drives performance, have a strong correlation in that variable, and then automate a way of testing it, and then have a feedback loop that keeps fixing that. Technology can do that. It should be able to solve that. Assessment companies like SHL and Thomson, they have a business around trying to solve these kind of things. You know, it's not new future technology we're talking about. It's done
There's a
already.
combination though, isn't it? It's a combination of using technology and people.
So does that then make the role of the recruiter in the future a project manager
I think well, yeah.
and a process manager and a
Absolutely.
data analyst, but actually, you know, is that where
It is today in a lot of recruitment
Yeah,
jobs.
the role
Yes.
process already exists, project already exists. Technology, I think, will just continue to enhance, and then we evolve with the technology. So as recruiters, we will just adapt ourselves both with the organisation that we're recruiting for and the technology that's available. And I think, you know, you take the internet, you take the high street. Everyone thought, you know, the internet was going to take over the high street, and the high street would die. The high street hasn't died; it's just evolved and does things in different ways. And I think it's the same with recruitment.
So project manager with thorough knowledge of the company, of the business, of the technology available, of the talent market available. That's what it's going to be. Absolutely.
I think those, like, what I've seen that being successful is those recruiters are embedded in the operational team. They're not in a room full of other recruiters doing
No.
all this.
No.
Again, coming back to does it fall under HR? It's more like there's a person who sits with that 30 people group because they support all their hiring needs. They eat
You
lunch
sit
with
with
them.
your
They
business.
they understand their needs. They go to
Absolutely.
management meetings and they kind of go. I know that this project we're discussing probably means we'll need these people in 6 months. So I'll build pools. But even there's one of the big tech companies. That we all know in the recruiting world, were talking to us about how they've restructured their recruiting team, the internal recruiting team, and they've built a whole team that just do talent pipelining. They don't, like, they see it as, we have a reactionary team. You know, somebody says we have headcount, fill them, and then we have a team that says we will need talent and these skills over the next couple of years. And their job is just to go talk to people, engage, have conversations, and put them in a talent pool, and then keep in touch with them. And create events for them to attend, create networking opportunities for them to sit with VPs and executives. The idea being that if the job eventually comes up, they'll probably have had 8 or 9 touch points with the organisation. They know them really well. They've got to know they've been able to assess them, if you like. So there's a different way of recruiting and their metrics are completely different, obviously, as well. But it's more along very much along the relationship and business-focused way of recruiting, as opposed to what is still the current situation with reactionary recruitment.
Yeah.
Fill a job.
But it's that much more proactive, future planning.
I
Absolutely.
think communities are, are vital. You know, social media now allows you to engage with a massive audience and talk to them on a constant basis. You know, it's if you can build those communities and like say succession planning and talent pipelining. You know, everyone's been talking about it for such a long time, but no one seems to be getting it right, and everyone is still very much transactional to, I need this now, I need this now. And what happens to, you probably think of all the response you get from a recruitment advert. You're only taking 10% of that and engagement. What's happened to 90% of people that in 6 months' time could be your ideal people that you're going to hire? And that's where I really think technology is going to play a massive, massive part in making it easier in some cases to go, well, actually, we've now got a talent pipeline of these people which have been filtered, whether it be algorithms that's picked these people out to say they're right, and then it's that actual human interaction that goes, okay, hiring manager, whoever it may be, that says that final decision on, yeah, these are right.
The thing about who does all this, like if you look about evolution of models of the industry, if you're a massive big organization, you can you can hire the 16 different skill levels that are required in a recruiting team. If you're a small to medium-sized business or a startup, you can't afford to have all the different faces you need in your recruiting team. And I think that's where you'll see a continued growth in specialists to say, we do this for everybody. We are brilliant at employer branding, we're brilliant at assessment, we're brilliant at whatever. We can deploy staff as you need them. Or even a big company that say, we need 5,000 more people. You have a new CEO decide we're doubling our sales force, and then you need support on that. Like people always, I think we're talking about general recruiting and a lot of in-house stuff here, but in terms of the agency and where that fits in there, I think it's a provider with regard to talent skills. There's such a need, whether it's SMEs just always need it because they'll never have their own staff and they'll need to be able to bring it in. Large corporates need to supplement that at times. They need specialist stuff. Just like, people always compare recruitment with travel agencies, say travel agencies died, okay? You could say the same thing with law firms. People started hiring in-house lawyers. It didn't kill law firms. I mean, law firms have specialisms. Everybody still uses outside counsel, even though you can hire your whole inside counsel team. It didn't kill that industry. And I think we got to stop comparing the agency market to travel agencies and more compare it to professional services firms. You can hire own accountants, but you still outsource it to KPMG and PwC, so on and so forth. Recruitment to me is the same because it's more of a professional level. Parts of recruitment have gone the travel agency world. I think hardcore sourcing where you're just writing really from scratch Boolean search strings and doing X-ray searching, automate that, bring the talent pool back Like 5-6 years ago, we had candidates to look at. We just had to assess them, and that was taken away from us. We got to go find them. Some of the tools like Bill's come up with, and some of those competitors have given us back the ability to come into work in the morning and have a list of people again. But now our skills are, how do we engage those, because it's different. So that, we're moving back up the food chain. Before we started this, I had a conversation with somebody that said, I think it was yourself, Mike, like 6 years ago, the skill set of a recruiter went out like that. We had to just learn all these new things. I think we're going back in again because technology is solving some of those for us, and specialist roles are popping up to do employer branding for us, to make sure that we have this done. So we can move back into some of the things you're talking about, Oscar, which is relationship management. Look at the whole business and it becoming a more senior role.
But also, part of that was also about survival. So over the last few years, it's about actually surviving. And then, as you say, doing that now is because actually the market's returning and people are actually starting to move into their specialisms in effect. So some of that is linked to obviously, how the economy is performing, plus coupled then with, how technology is then also developing and performing, and actually the two start to dovetail together.
Big time, big time. So I think, do we agree, do we think, and look at staffing levels, do we think that there will be as many people employed in recruiting in 7 years as there are today? Or do you think that through all this consolidation and automation, that overall there'll be less, but maybe they'll be higher skilled?
I think what you'll find is that there will be people, there's probably the same number, but whether you'll be able to classify that they are all in recruitment, because I think they'll have different titles, which is what we've said in terms of specialisation. So whether that be strategic workforce planners, employment brand specialists. So I think the shape of the industry, and probably we'll need to redefine what some of those categories are. I think they'll morph into marketing type roles with social media, but I think essentially it'll probably be the same number.
Is that in-house or kind of across the entire value chain? So the recruitment consultancies.
I think it's still be the same. I think because if you look, you're forecasting that we'll have more of a continued workforce, and it'll be more people will be moving quicker. You won't be in your job for 3 to 5 years' time. We're already seeing that reduction now. So if you move and say that you're going to have a more temporary workforce, then that requires more people to manage that. So whether that be an RPO that's actually becomes the real key. And we need that because we just need people that can manage it constantly.
Yeah, so one trend kind of towards that greater churn, is people being brought in just to work on projects. Yeah, just people being hired for projects. In which case, if people are just coming in for a 5-month engagement or 9-month engagement or a 13-month engagement, as opposed to 36 months, hopefully 5-year engagements, in that scenario, you would need more staffing in the HR department because your churn is greater. So even if there's the same number of employees at the organization,
the contractual
you're actually
relationships
hiring
could change a lot. I think you will see more
freelancers.
freelancers.
I think
it's already happening though, isn't it? There is a lot more freelance workers out there.
Interims,
People like to kind of manage that work-life balance. The job for life totally gone now. So as next generation comes through, there actually will be freelance contractors, I believe, and actually will decide who they want to work for, the type of job they want to do, length of assignment, pay rate to a degree, geography as well, because there's really a lot more at their disposal. So, traditional temp model's kind of gone, job for life's kind of gone. I think there'll be this real kind of mobile workforce.
Your CV will actually look good if you've got lots of 1-year contracts on there, because you're multi-skilled as opposed to now you jumped around a little bit too much, and I do think that's moving because you actually viewed that you've picked up different skills that you're doing, and therefore you're a more valuable asset to the business.
And also more organisations are actively moving people through their business in a 1 or 2 year cycle. So they learn, develop, move on, learn, develop, move on. They don't get stuck in a role anymore. And we've noticed that, and that's evident that people are doing that. So even our contacts that we would have suddenly move on, and a new contact's replaced because actually they've gone on to do another job because actually they've learned those skills, and it's time proactively to move rather than staying in a particular role for a good
If you
number
have
of
that
years.
kind of fragmentation and you have that increasingly diverse workforce of recruiters with different skills and requirements, that raises a question that's close to my heart, which is what are the qualifications of a recruiter in the future? Are you looking for a marketing degree from one person? You're looking for somebody who has a proper assessment and clinical psychologistic background for your other role? Like what is the kind of, because recruiters have large, in-house corporates have hired people with HR degrees and HR backgrounds, and agencies have hired people with a good sales background. So where does that fit in terms of what are the future skills and qualifications, therefore, that we look for in this workforce?
Good question.
To give you a bit of an idea, I have a hotel management background, so more like a general management background. So I've learned things about marketing, about sales, about HR, about facilities, operation management. So it gives you a really broad view of what's out there in the business. It gives you a good understanding of how business works. It makes you a good sparring partner for your hiring managers as well, because you quickly understand their business. So a more general management background probably would do better than...
I'd argue entrepreneurial, because you've quite an entrepreneurial kind of focus as well. You know, you
Yeah, but
like working for
that
yourself
needs to fit then with the specific organisation. So for some of us that works, for other organisations it might not work. So, but as opposed to a more specialised high HR management background, I think a recruiter should be more like a generalist in that.
If you've got more technology to help you then, or interpersonal skills, and actually that understanding people, does that not become the main focus of the people you should have there?
But do you not have a computer science degree to do some of the data mining stuff and handle the computers that are doing the automation stuff? Do you not have to have a psychology background to do some of the assessment stuff? Do you not have to have a more general background to be a project manager? You know, what are the different?
It's a good question. I mean, I think the way I would approach that question is I would try to think, like, what does the world look like in 2020? So what I do believe will happen is if you have a job spec, there'll be a database of 3 billion candidates, and that database will do a pretty good job of giving you 30 candidates. And if you're one of the 3 billion people in this database, if a job opens up that is of interest to you, you will get, on a mobile device, you will get notified. And so like that, I think, we'll definitely see in 2020. So then, what are those roles? Yeah, so understanding that, and then understanding the calendaring function, I think that'll be largely automated. A lot of the CRM stuff, which is managing the candidate, the relationship, and all that, I think a lot of that will be automated. So then,
I can't wait.
So if that's the, I don't know if that's the right vision of how things are going to work. I mean, that's what I would bet. A lot of those things will be in place. I think we'll see more project work, so we'll see the higher churn.
But I do think the point there around the qualifications, I think that will be more important going forward. So I think it will be a linked qualification to the specialism you're servicing. So scientific, we've already noticed that more people in our scientific world have scientific degrees in one way, shape or form. So actually we're noticing that already, is actually you're bringing people with actually a real interest in the sector they're going to service or the specialism that they're recruiting into. But more importantly, then the client has complete confidence because actually you understand the real detail and not just surface.
So I think to close, because we were out of time, I think with Bill's summary of the kind of different pieces there and the skills gaps, I think there's never been a more exciting time to enter the recruitment industry.
Absolutely.
I think there's so many different offshoots you can take regardless of the discipline you have, your interest, what gives you a drive. I think recruiting is becoming a really sexy industry to want to work in, because we're going off in all these different tangents where you can choose your niche and go do that. To me, if I was starting off from university saying, what will I do now? I think recruiting now offers such a varied career and loads of options. And I think you're going to earn more money in 2020. There's going to be more opportunities, more diverse. And if every CEO stays true to their word and that talent remains their top focus, I think we're all okay and we'll all still have jobs by 2020.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you everybody for our first track. We're going offline for a couple of minutes and we will be back with our next track covering mobile recruiting.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.